COVID-19 has been disruptive in many walks of life and certainly in education. That especially goes for students making a very abnormal transition from high school to college, or in some cases, even contending with losses from COVID in their own family. Telling that as a news story requires a different kind of attention and perspective, which you can find in COVID in the Classroom, a multi platform effort by GBH News. To tell us about the coverage, including its focus on a high school senior from South Boston, is the executive producer, Stephanie Leydon. Thank you very much for being with us, Stephanie.
Thank you for having me, Chris. Great to be here.
Stephanie, we've been exposed to some of this story in a way in other media and other platforms, usually the metrics about learning loss or virtual absenteeism. But what you have here is a different story. And it's not just the story that's different, but it's who's telling the story.
That's right. I mean, we were thinking this summer that obviously education was going to be a huge story this year. It affects us all, right? As parents, as residents of a community, as educators. But who does it affect more than anyone else? It's students. And we were very interested in getting the student experience and really trying to understand and have them share what they were going through. So that was the whole idea behind COVID in the classroom, to really tell the stories of these students, a lot of times in their own words, about what they were experiencing during this year.
Well, one of the things I was quick to pick on, and I know there's a local student, Thomas White, who's from South Boston, is what happens when you don't have the usual structures in place.
Absolutely. I mean, here are these kids who are now, I mean, they're adolescents. They're at this point in their life. We focused, I should back up a minute. We focused on high school seniors, thinking that it's a transitional year. It's a year where there's a lot of expectations. You may, as Thomas White does, play a sport, and then you get to be, it's your senior year, it's your last season. This is the moment for you to meet personal goals, to potentially uh, be attracted to a college or whatever it might be. It might be your next step. So we picked seniors. We also thought seniors were old enough to really be able to tell their own stories and communicate with us effectively. They're young adults at that point. But yes, here they are in this world that has been completely disrupted. I mean, they are social. By and large, they're forming their own personality, their own worlds, right? They're breaking away from family, connecting with their peers, and now they're thrust into this situation where they have limited contact with peers. They can't even see their teachers in person for the most part, right? They're remote, so they're having to learn and live in a completely different way.
Well, one way that Thomas White tells the story is he actually crafts a college essay from the routine that he's using to, I guess, hold his life together, really. He goes out and he runs through 8 different neighborhoods in the city. But, what's the gist of that story?
Well, so Thomas is, and they're all. We reached out to, we did a wide sort of shout out on social media. We contacted educators all around Boston, Greater Boston. We heard from so many fantastic kids. We settled on these three. Thomas was one of them. He is such a thoughtful kid. He's a runner. And running is, as he says in his college essay, part of his identity. We asked the kids, one of our other students had read part of her college essay to one of our reporters as part of a story we were working on. And I heard that essay, I thought, oh, I want to hear all these kids' essays. So Thomas shared his with us. And it was so poignant, I think, because he talks about how running is so meaningful to him and how it's this time when he can reflect on his life, his community. And what struck me about it was he can reflect on what he's grateful for. It's a break from the barrage of social media, which can be so much about comparison. So these kids may be separate from their peers during this time, but they sure are connected on social, which can be. But he talked about how in that essay, and I do encourage people to go check it out at COVID in the Classroom on PBH. He talked about how that this is his time at 5:30 in the morning to go out and run through the streets of Boston. So that was a look at a way he is coping and doing something that he loves, and luckily can still be doing because so much has been taken away from him from all these things.
You've got to consider other things that some of these students had to cope with. Erin Pierre, a student from Everett, death in the family.
Yeah, she is an amazing young woman. Yes, she is of Haitian descent, first generation, lives in Everett, and both her parents actually got COVID in the spring. Her dad ended up passing. He lived in New Jersey. Ended up passing. She was not able to sort of, you know, formally mark his passing until the fall. So she lived with that kind of loss. Her mother had COVID. Her mother, who works as a home healthcare aide, got COVID in the spring. She and her sister had to kind of pick up the slack around the house. They sort of had to take care of things. The mom recovered. Her story is amazing. The mom is now being treated for leukemia, and because of COVID restrictions, is isolated in the hospital. And Anne-Laurie, her family can't see the mom. And the extraordinary thing about Anne-Laurie is she's dealing with all that. She shared a lot of that with us. She's also an 18-year-old kid who's just been accepted to college, is working on getting a scholarship so she can afford it, is spending this month, Black History Month, working with a group that she founded, Empowering Young Black Excellence, and has a month-long slate of speakers that she's sharing with her community. So on the one hand, she's dealing with the real hard, harsh, the most harsh impacts of COVID. And yet she's this optimistic, forward-looking young woman as well. It's extraordinary. Every time she does an interview with one of our reporters or shares a video diary, you just, I, and I think our audience just kind of stops and has to just really think about what an extraordinary kid she is.
This diary is so different from what you usually see in print or TV, which is more event driven. You get at the feelings here. And I was watching Lori talking about her parents and what they've been going through. And you hear these long pauses, and you're getting from her how difficult it is to even talk about this. In TV, this would be rambling, but in your format, it's powerful and coherent. How does that happen?
Oh, thank you. I think the beauty of what we're able to do is leverage the platforms of GBH News. So the video diaries are on this landing page on GBH News called COVID in the Classroom, and there's a timeline, and so there is space to put entries from each of these video diaries from the kids, so you can take that in at your leisure. We're also producing the pieces, like you saw that beautiful piece of Thomas running through the streets of Boston, Postcard to Boston, which are more heavily produced, which also work as pieces on digital, on social, on Greater Boston, on television. And we're also taking sound from the students and using it on our NPR station 89.7. So we use the sound, the pictures, the thoughts of the kids in different ways, depending on the platform, so that the audience can take it in wherever they are.
One thing I noticed from the series here is this difference between the way Thomas talks about what he's going through, and I know this might reflect circumstances as well, but the young women are a lot more open about mental health. Uh, did you notice something like that?
When we started this, when we just kind of launched the idea, we were looking for students who might like to be part of this. And we did big outreach and heard from a bunch of kids. And then I personally, spoke with a number of them. And they were also fantastic, but it skewed so heavily toward young women. Girls were more interested just overall in doing this project than boys. And I spoke with a couple of educators about this. I said, yeah, it's we're noticing that we're getting a much bigger response from girls rather than boys. And to a person, principals, teachers I spoke with said, oh, that's not surprising. At that age, girls tend to just be a little bit more open. So I think I don't know why that is, Chris. I suppose we could, think about a lot of reasons that males and females sort of have different perspectives or different levels of openness at different points. But yeah, we are seeing that in this project.
And I counted as something I would not have learned otherwise about how mental health can affect education. One more reason to catch up with your series, which is still in progress, I think. So if they want to do that, how should they find it?
The series absolutely is in progress. We're going to follow these kids right through graduation. The easiest thing to do is to go to GBH News and look for COVID in the classroom.
Thank you very much for taking your time, and nice to meet you.
You too, Chris. Thanks so much.
Stephanie Leydon from GBH News. We'll have more news in just a moment.